All right, folks. It's late, but I'm here. Okay. So I wanted to start endocrine system today. Um, so that we'll have time to finish it. We'll have to figure out how the next week, Wednesday. Let me ask. Is there any time on the Wednesday where we can do a little online thing next week, Wednesday? I'm assuming that you would want to do something right after your in-course test. But can we do something like, you know, we don't really have a lab next week. So is there any time that you can all be available next week, Wednesday? Let me know, please.
Sir,
What time?
available for what?
Hmm?
Available for
To the little class on reproduction. Since
how
we
long?
probably an hour and a half at the most. You gotta let me know. I see 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 being suggested. As usual, y'all come together and then let me know, okay? I think there should be a room available on the Wednesday, right? As I said, since we're not doing lab that day, I can do it at any time during the course of the day. All right. So anyhow, let's continue. I might have a dip out in a couple of minutes because I'm actually cooking at the moment, where I'm teaching and cooking at the same time. But my children are starting to sniff around the pot, so I have to be careful before anybody go ramp with it. So I need to dip out in 5 minutes time, and then come right back. Okay. Okay. So you should be seeing my screen now. So endocrine system. Obviously, endocrine system is all about hormones, right? I think we're all aware of this fact. Now, let me set this up real quick. What we're going to do basically is talk about the types of hormones, right? And what they do. That is essentially what we're going to be doing, okay? Now, you already know about the major functions of the endocrine system. You know it acts in conjunction with your nervous system, right? To help progress your body or to maintain your body. So, for example, if you're hot, this is your nervous system that picks up the fact that you're hot. And you can then have the input of hormones like adrenaline, right? That can help. Or let's say your blood pressure is low. Once again, your nervous system can send impulses to your hypothalamus, which can then send impulses to other parts of the brain to trigger the hunger reflex, right? So your nervous system and your endocrine system work hand in hand together to cause effects, right? But they're obviously not the same, right? For the most part, the endocrine system is generally controlled and influenced by hormones. Your hormones are transported by your blood. We already did the difference between endocrine and exocrine glands. For example, all the glands we mentioned in skin, as you know, all those are exocrine glands because they all have ducts, right? Endocrine glands, no ducts. You go straight into the blood, right? So your hormones go straight into the blood. No, the endocrine system, its mode of action is much longer than that of your nervous system, but it is longer lasting as well. So, for example, fight or flight, you get terrified, you know, your heart starts beating faster almost instantaneously. When somebody frighten you, heart start beating, breathing rate increases, that's almost instantaneous, right? That's nervous system. Getting taller over a period of a year or two, that of course is your endocrine system. Nervous system, you can reverse the effects, right? In some cases, the endocrine system causes long-lasting, if not permanent, impacts, right? Now, endocrinology, of course, is the study of hormones and what they do, right? So here are some of the things that are controlled by your hormones, your endocrine system. Reproduction, what do I mean by that? It is the hormones that you release that determine your progression through reproductive development. Okay, it's hormones that determine when puberty begin. It is hormones that determine when a woman's ability to reproduce ends. Right? It is hormones that determine how fast you grow and how much you grow. As you know, you also need hormones to help you with maintenance of your electrolytes, fluid, electrolytes, fluid, nutrients, all of these things, right? Remember, we spoke about leptin and ghrelin, and how leptin is a satiety hormone. And if you have plenty of leptin, you don't feel so hungry. And ghrelin causes you to feel hungry. You remember that stuff? Those are hormones, right? Then you have regulation of cellular metabolism and energy balance, which means, of course, that your hormones can speed up your metabolic rate or cause your metabolic rate to speed up, cause you to slow down. Hormones can even be involved in your immune system responses, okay? Because your immune cells can release hormones that trigger other immune cells to act. Okay, so there's lots of things that your endocrine system is involved in, right? First thing off the bat, now this is one of these things that I know you're already familiar with. These, of course, are the major glands of your endocrine system, the major hormone secreting glands. For example, well, let's start with this one. Maybe you don't know this one. Have you all ever heard of the pineal gland? Or some people say pineal, however you want to pronounce it. Your pineal or pineal gland. This one is in your brain, produces something called melatonin. And I'll talk about that this in a minute. You know hypothalamus though, and you have the pituitary gland, which everybody calls the master gland, which is a very bad name for it because it's really not mastering anything. It's really the hypothalamus that should be the master gland, but I'll explain why that is later. Thyroid gland, you all know about thyroxine, not not thyroxine, calcitonin, and those things from AMP1. So you know thyroid gland. Parathyroid gland, you all should know that one as well. That's PTH. And of course the thymus, you remember thymus? Where your T lymphocytes go to become active, and thymosin. Adrenal glands, they produce a lot more than adrenaline, but we'll talk about that as well. Pancreas, you all know pancreas is one of these funny glands. It is both an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. Remember, your pancreas is making like insulin, which is endocrine, but it's making the pancreatic juice with the digestive hormone enzymes, which is exocrine, right? And of course, you have the ovary and the testes for sex hormones. You're all familiar with all of these from CSEC, right? So most of what I'm about to tell you is not going to come as any surprise, right? Now, hormones, what are they? They're chemical messengers. When your hypothalamus wants to cause something to occur in the body, it causes the release of a particular hormone. That hormone carries a message by the blood to wherever in the body you want the change to occur, right? For example, your blood pressure is too low, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary gland, causes the release of ADH. ADH goes in the blood, ends up in the kidneys, goes to the collecting duct, causes the reabsorption of water from the collecting duct that goes back to the blood. Your blood pressure rises, right? That should sound familiar to you, right? That's what I mean when I say it's a message. So the ADH is a message sent.
Sir,
Yes, go ahead.
what you said, if the blood pressure is low,
Yes. So you reabsorb
okay.
water via ADH. Then now we have so that's a hormone. But we also have chemicals that act like hormones as well. So these are autocrines, and these are chemicals that exert effects on the same cell that produce them. So you can even have hormones within cells themselves, right? So autocrines are intercellular hormones, right? Essentially. Whereas your regular hormones, of course, are going between cells, right? Okay. Then you also have these things called paracrines. As it says, these hormones, these are local hormones now. So remember, I gave an example of ADH, which is being released from the pituitary gland that has its effects all the way down at your kidneys. Whereas paracrines are going to be produced in the same area and cause their effects in the same area, right? So please, autocrines and paracrines, as it says, are local chemical messengers, right? Whereas hormones are not local, they travel to do their effect. Please keep that in mind, okay? Okay. So what are some of the things that, how do hormones work? As I mentioned here, hormone action on target cells may be to alter plasma membrane permeability of membrane potential by opening and closing ion channels. What does this mean? It means that the hormone can make a membrane more permeable to the movement of substances. For example, insulin, when it is released from the pancreas, goes to the cells of the liver and goes to the cells of your skeletal muscle, and it causes them to become more permeable to glucose. So insulin causes an increase in the permeability of liver cells and skeletal muscle cells, which allows them to absorb more glucose from the blood, causing your blood sugar to go down, right? That's an example, right? Then you have stimulate synthesis of proteins or regulatory molecules. Testosterone goes into your skeletal muscle cells and triggers the production of muscle protein. You remember actin and myosin, which of course increases the strength of your muscle, right? It also says, remember, the testosterone goes into the cells, right? Whereas I mentioned the insulin goes to the cell membrane, okay? Then you have activate or deactivate enzyme system. Remember the renin aldosterone angiotensin system, the RAAS, and of course, induce secretory activity. So a hormone can cause the secretion of other hormones. And a lot of it is going on with the hypothalamus, right? And it can even cause the stimulation of mitosis. So you get cut, damage. You can have an increase in mitotic division in that area to seal a wound, but also stimulate growth via mitosis as well. All right. So this just gives you a basic overview, right? Now, how do we classify hormones? We're going to be looking at amino acid-based hormones and steroid-based hormones being the two main classes of hormones. All right. So we have amino acid-based hormones, which are divided into amino acid derivatives, peptides, and proteins. All this is saying is that the hormones are made up of amino acids, peptides, and proteins, okay? For the most part, these kinds of hormones can be secreted directly into the blood, okay? But they cannot go inside the cells. They have to attach to receptors on the surface of a cell. So these amino acid hormones, for the most part, there are one or two exceptions, but for the most part, they stay outside the cell and bind to the cell membrane to cause something to happen. Steroid hormones now are basically cholesterol-based hormones. Cholesterol, remember, cholesterol is a lipid essentially. These lipid-based / cholesterol-based hormones now, these do enter your cells. They pass through the cell membrane, go into your cells, and cause a reaction that way. Okay? So we've already distinguished between what these two types of classes of hormones are made up of and how they do their action. Amino acid, cell membrane, steroid hormones impact things inside the cells themselves. Okay? All right. So this is showing you here now your amino acid-based hormones, which are what we call water soluble. So they bind to so this is a hormone, it comes along through the blood, leaves the bloodstream, goes into the tissue fluid, and binds to a receptor on the surface of a tissue, of your cell, right? Of the cells in the tissue. And then binding to the receptor triggers now some activity inside the cell here. So it shows here what we call a G protein. So this binding to this receptor triggers a G protein. Then the G protein can come along. Let's say that this is a channel. Let's say this is a sodium channel. And then G protein can activate this channel to know, or let's say it's a glucose channel, sorry. So G protein can activate the glucose channel. And all of a sudden now the glucose channel opens, and it is easier for glucose to leave the blood and flow into the cell. Right? So that means this hormone never enters the cell, but it triggers a second messenger. Right? So this is the first message here. And then the G protein is the second message. And it tells whatever structure inside the cell what to do. Remember, the hormone doesn't go inside the cell. The lipid ones now, these ones work differently. They, once again, go into the blood, or extracellular fluid, I should say. And then they now can pass through the cell membrane, go into the cell. Some of them go right into the nucleus itself, and then bind to the DNA and trigger the production. Okay? Remember, completely different mode of action. Okay? So this is here showing you basically, well, you should be able to tell me now, based on what you're seeing here, if this hormone here is a lipid-based or amino acid-based. I'm going to give you a moment to look at this real quick. So give me 2 minutes, please.
Sir, it's an amino acid base.
All right, so I am back. I see a question. Let me see. So this is amino acid based.
Amino acid.
All right. So I am
Yes, sir.
I'm in agreement with this. So you can see here, first hormone binds, which is the first messenger,
It
binds the
binds to
receptor.
the
Mm-hmm. Then we have our second
but it
messenger
don't go
here.
into the cell.
Right. So you can see our second messenger becomes active. Then as you can see here, it says receptor activates G protein. And then G protein moves along and it activates. Now, in this case, this says it's adenyl cyclase, which is an enzyme. And this enzyme here now is going to activate cyclic AMP. And cyclic AMP is going to convert kinase, which is inactive, to active kinase. And that triggers the production of enzymes, right? So this, of course, as you rightly say, is amino acid based. Why? Because the hormone is not going inside the cell, okay? All right, good. So this is another example. It says cyclic AMP signaling mechanism. It activated kinase, phosphorylate, and it phosphorylates various proteins, activating some and inactivating others. So depending on the cell, this mechanism can be used to turn things on or turn them off, right? Okay, good. So this is another example of a amino acid one. So you can see once again it's binding to the outside, right? Then once again, the receptor activates our next messenger, which moves on, as it says, to a G protein subunit, which triggers the process here. And that, of course, causes this cascade reaction here, as you can see, right? So it's another example of the second messenger going on, right? Okay, good. Now, so we have two examples of your amino acid based on how it affects inside the cells, right? It also mentions CGMP, but we're not so interested in that one this time around, right? Now, the intracellular one, remember we said once again, the steroid hormone goes through the cell membrane, as it says here. In this case, it binds the receptor inside the cell cytoplasm and forms a complex. Then the complex moves through the nuclear membrane, goes into the nucleus, and binds the receptor in the nucleus that is now targeting DNA strands and causing the DNA strands to start producing mRNA, which is used to make various things. In this case here, protein synthesis. So this is how, for example, testosterone affects your muscle. So testosterone passes through the cell membrane, binds to a hormone, to a receptor inside the cytoplasm, then moves into the nucleus and then activates receptors in the nucleus, causing the production of mRNA, which is used to make muscle protein. And then the muscle protein, of course, is used by the cell to build up your muscle, right? All right, good. So obviously this is steroid-based because, or lipid-based, or cholesterol-based, whatever you want to put it, because this is passing through the cell membrane to get inside the cell. Cool. Now, here's the thing about hormones. Hormones are kind of like enzymes. By that I mean they are relatively specific. So this means that if you have a cell that does not have the right receptor for a hormone, it simply will not react to the hormone, which makes perfect sense. Perfect sense, right? Not all parts of your body should be able to react to the same types of hormones, okay? So target cells must have specific receptors to which the hormones can bind, as it says. So ACTH, which is acetyl receptors, are only found in certain cells. This is adrenocorticosteroid hormone of the adrenal cortex, right? Thyroxine receptors are found in nearly all cells of the body. Thyroxine, as you know, can affect metabolic rate, okay? So as it says, target cell activation depends on three things: the amount of hormone in the blood, the number of receptors on the cell, and the affinity of binding between the hormone and the receptor. What are we talking about here? The more hormone you have in your blood, right, the more receptors are going to become active. So if you are, for example, taking testosterone. When you, let's say you are taking steroids, as we call them. Now, when we say steroids, we mean testosterone, right? It's from a bodybuilding perspective. Increasing testosterone levels in the blood means that more testosterone gets into your muscle cells, which means that more muscle protein will be produced. And this is what speeds up the rate at which your muscles get built up, right? So the more target cells receive that testosterone, the greater the effect will be. Also, the more receptors you have in these cells for the hormone, also the greater the impact will be. And then we can go all the way down to affinity. The more easily the hormones can bind to the receptors in the cells, also the faster impact will be as well, okay? So hopefully that all makes sense to you, right?
Sir, please repeat what you just said.
All right, what I'm saying to you is that the more hormone you have in the blood, the more of this hormone will get to the target cells, which is why injecting yourself with testosterone, it means more testosterone will end up in your muscle cells. And then the more testosterone you have binding to the receptors inside the muscle cells, the more muscle protein will be produced, and therefore the greater the rate or the faster the rate of your muscle will grow. Okay. And I also said the more easy it is for the hormone to bind to the receptor, also the faster the impact will be. All right. So if testosterone binds easily to its receptor inside the nucleus, and there's plenty of testosterone going around, and there are plenty of receptors going around, then the muscle protein production will increase rapidly. Okay? Now let's talk about up and down regulation. In upregulation, you have target cells form more receptors in response to the hormone. So the idea here is that as you increase hormone levels, the cells themselves start to make more receptors to receive the hormones. So you have a greater, so the hormone over time has a greater impact on the cells. The cells become more sensitive to the hormones. For example, growth hormone. As growth, your body becomes more sensitive to growth hormone as you for the first few years of your life, which increases your rate of growth dramatically. Right? As you hit adulthood, you become less sensitive to growth hormone because you're down regulating. So you're losing receptors. So as you're growing, you gain receptors for growth hormone for a while to speed up your rate of growth. That's upregulates. So the same amount of growth hormone causes a greater impact. And then as you get beyond into adult age, you start down regulating growth hormone receptors. So even the same amount of growth hormone has a lower impact on the person, right? This is one of the reasons why growth hormone doesn't work very well on people who are older. It works better on young, not old people. Anyway. Cool. So far, so good, I hope. No complaints, that's good. So, yes, go ahead.
What you said about the growth hormone and the adult, you said that the older the person gets, the less effective the growth hormone be.
100%.
So that's the down
right, because you're losing receptors to it. That's down regulation. So from your, when you're born as an infant, you have an increase in the number of growth hormone receptors in the cells, because if you think about it, you grow most rapidly in the first 4 years of life. And then growth slows a bit. Then you hit puberty, you grow a little bit more. And then after, let's say, age about 23 or so, the growth hormone levels start to come down, but also the number of receptors you have starts to go down as well. So if you give an adult growth hormone, they're not going to grow. They're not going to get taller, right? Because it is now less effective on them because they have less receptors for it. Well, that's one of the reasons anyway, right? Now, we already mentioned that hormones circulate the blood either free or bound. That means that steroid hormones and thyroid hormones have to be attached to plasma proteins. Why? Because both of these are lipid-based hormones. Remember, lipid-based hormone. Remember, whole thing about lipids. Everybody knows oil and water does not a good pair make. So what happens? Just like when you eat food in digestion, and the fatty acid and the glycerol has to go into your digestive, go through your small intestine, right? Form the chylomicrons, move into the lacteal, then join themselves to proteins, and then that goes back to the blood. And then now you can carry the fatty acids in the blood. The same thing is happening here with these hormones. Steroid hormones, thyroid hormones, you need to attach them to proteins so they can go through the blood. This is also the reason why when people are injecting steroids, you can't inject steroids directly into the blood because they cannot be carried properly there. You inject steroids into the fat or under the skin. So as the steroid makes its way through the body, they get attached to the carrier proteins, then they go into the blood. Okay? So for the most part, steroid-based hormones go into fat, whereas amino acid-based hormones can be injected directly into the blood. Okay? All right. Now, it mentions here, so as all others can circulate without carriers, which means the amino acid protein-based hormones, no carriers required, right? Hormones are removed by degrading enzymes. So you have enzymes that will break down your hormones when they're no longer required. This happens at the liver and the kidneys. So your kidneys and your liver help to remove excess hormones from your blood. And the half-life is the time required for the hormones in the blood to drop to half its current level. Okay? Oh my goodness, why is the color like this? Now, oh, no, I remember. Should start coming in when I do that. Yeah, there you go. So, multiple hormones can interact in several different ways now. So we're looking at the mode of action or interaction of these hormones, all right? So we're looking at three modes of action: permissiveness, synergism, and antagonism. So permissiveness, one hormone cannot exert its effect without another hormone being present. So you need two hormones working together for things to work properly. So for example, well, when we talk about thyroxine and growth hormone, for example, later on, growth hormone, of course, makes you grow. Thyroxine increases your metabolic rate, which, if you think about it, you need to increase your metabolic rate to grow. So you need both of those hormones working together in order for you to grow. Okay? So one hormone that tells the cells, hey, it's time to get to grow, make more cells, please. And another hormone that says, hey, here's more energy to make the extra cells. You need both of them together for you to grow. Then you have synergism, where more than one hormone produces the same effects on a target. So they're working together to cause the same thing to happen. Then you have antagonism, where the hormones work against each other. You remember insulin and the glucagon? So insulin causes your blood sugar to drop, of course, by causing your muscle cells, skeletal muscles, and your liver to become more permeable to glucose. They absorb glucose from the blood, the blood sugar goes down. Whereas glucagon, as you know from CSEC, causes your muscle cells and your liver cells to break down glycogen, which is how we store the glucose, remember please, and that gets released back into the blood, causing your blood sugar to go up. So these hormones are antagonistic. They're working against each other, right? Cool. Now, I just need to see if we can get to slide 30, okay? Let me get to slide 30 and we call it a night. So, control of hormone release now. So now, so our levels of hormone release are controlled by what we call negative feedback. Okay? In a nutshell, negative feedback responds to a change in the body, some characteristic of the body, which causes a reversion back to whatever level that thing was before. So, for example, if you're the classic example is your blood sugar drops, you miss dinner. What happens? Your blood sugar is too low now. You release glucagon from the pancreas. Glucagon causes you, once again, remember, to break down glycogen, which is how you store glucose. Glucose enters the blood. Your blood sugar rises back to its normal levels, right? So, negative feedback. If you have too much glucose in the blood, of course, you release insulin, reabsorption of that glucose, your blood glucose goes back to normal, right? We call normal in the body, we call it a set point. So whatever the value is that your body wants to keep something at, whether it's your body temperature, whether it's salt concentration in the blood, whatever it is, that is your body's set point. That is normally the optimal level in which your body works best. So it wants to keep it there. All right. And so negative feedback allows you to maintain your set point. Okay. All right. Now it mentions here, because of the hormones, you're going to get very, very low variability because you have a very narrow range of set points. Okay, cool. So you synthesize and release hormones due to humoral stimulus, neural stimulus, or hormonal stimulus. So hormones can trigger the release of other hormones. You have nervous action can cause release of hormones, and cells, individual cells, can cause the release of hormones as well. Okay? All right. So as it says here, changing blood levels of ions and nutrients stimulates the secretion of hormones. Right? So the cells themselves, once they pick up the levels of sodium, if, for example, in the body diminishing, so hypothalamus, the blood is coming through hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is checking the osmotic pressure of the blood. Hey, there's whole heap of salt in the blood, or there's not enough salt in the blood, I should say. And so what does the hypothalamus do? It causes the release of the ADH, right? Sorry, yeah, plenty of salt, not enough water. Cause the release of the ADH, reabsorption, of course, of water goes to the blood. So you're triggering the hypothalamus to cause the action, okay? Now, this is another example here. It shows capillary blood calcium gets low, and that stimulates, as you can see here, the calcium low in the blood stimulates the thyroid gland here. Then you have parathyroid hormone being released. And parathyroid hormone, remember what it does? It causes increase in the breakdown of calcium in the bones, and that returns that excess calcium to the blood, right? So if your blood calcium is too low, parathyroid hormone causes your bones to release extra calcium that goes to the blood. Your calcium level in the blood will therefore rise. Okay? So remember, what is sensing this? The epithelial cells themselves in the capillaries are picking up there's not enough calcium. All right. So this is humoral response as an example, right? Neural stimulation, once again, nerves are triggering the release. So sympathetic nerve system fibers can trigger the release of adrenaline. Right? So you see something, you get scared, it triggers sympathetic nerves to trigger, then you start releasing hormones like adrenaline. Right? Then now we have hormonal stimulus. So once again, hormones stimulate other hormones. So the hypothalamus can release hormones that can trigger the release of other hormones. So it mentions that anterior pituitary hormones are stimulated by hormones from the hypothalamus. And then that causes the pituitary to release hormones. And we're going to talk more about these types of hormones later, especially look at what they are, but just be aware. So the hypothalamus can release hormones that cause the pituitary gland to release hormones. So the hypothalamus is making hormone-releasing hormones, which affect the pituitary gland. Okay. All right. I'm not going too quickly. I don't want to get too confusing, right? Now, it also mentions here that things like stress can result in the release of hormones as well. So that's nervous system stimulation can impact your release of hormones, right? So the stimulation of endocrine glands and their negative feedback mechanisms. So stress causes coactivation of hypothalamic neurons, and sympathetic division of autonomic nervous system. As a result, blood glucose level rises. So you're stressed, that triggers release of hormones that result in a rise in your blood glucose level. All right. All right. Then now we have pituitary gland and hypothalamus now. The pituitary gland is referred to as the master gland because it produces more hormones that have a direct impact on the body than any other gland. All right. Technically, it is under the control of the hypothalamus, but we won't worry about that right now. So as I said, it's about 600 milligrams in weight. It's not very big. It mentions its location in the hypophyseal fossa above the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. If I ask you where the pituitary gland is, this of course is the response I'm expecting. Your pituitary gland has two parts. You have the posterior pituitary gland, which is known as the neurohypophysis. And then you have the anterior pituitary gland, which is known of as the adenohypophysis. Okay, two parts: anterior adenohypophysis, posterior neurohypophysis. All right. So the posterior part now, or the neurohypophysis, as it says, is a downgrowth of hypothalamic neural tissue. What does this mean? It means that this part of your pituitary gland is actually coming from.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
You said that the pituitary gland is located in the hypophyseal fossa above the sphenoid bone.
Sella turcica of the sphenoid bone.
Okay.
So it's the hypophyseal fossa. Remember hypophysis, right? Above the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. So it's above the sphenoid bone, essentially, right? Now, we mentioned the two parts, anterior, posterior. What I was mentioning here is that the posterior part of the pituitary gland is actually coming from the hypothalamus. That's why this is a downgrowth from the hypothalamus, right? This is important because the hormones in your neurohypophysis are actually made by the hypothalamus and then passed down into your neurohypophysis, right? So these hormones, oxytocin and ADH, are stored in your posterior pituitary or your neurohypophysis, but they are produced in the hypothalamus and it just passed down, okay? So the other hormones we're going to talk about in the pituitary are made by the pituitary gland. But those particular ones are not. They're just stored. Go ahead, Zana.
So I was asking if the oxytocin, if that is the love hormone.
That is one of its functions, and I'm going to talk about that. It is, yes, some people do refer to it as the love hormone. That'd be facetious, but yeah. Now the anterior part of the pituitary gland now. Or the adenohypophysis. As it is that it originates as an outpocketing of the oral mucosa. Okay. And it contains, you're going to find it now as a part of the hypophyseal portal system. You'll have a primary capillary plexus within it. If you think about it, it needs a capillary plexus. Why? Because it's producing hormones that have to go directly into the blood. So it is going to need a way of getting them into the blood. It has hypophyseal portal veins coming from the hypophysis, right? And it also has another capillary plexus, a secondary one. So there's plenty of capillaries inside the pituitary gland because it has to dump its hormones into these capillaries, right? It carries releasing and inhibiting hormones to the anterior pituitary to regulate hormone secretion. All right, good. Now, let's just look at it again. So here we have our anterior lobe of the pituitary or adenohypophysis. Here we have the posterior lobe, or remember this is posterior, or the neuroapophysis. Okay. We have the inside now, the anterior. We have our secondary capillary plexus. We have our primary capillary plexus. We have our hypophyseal veins. So when you're dumping your hormones in, they go from the capillaries to the veins, right? Then now we get to different types of hormones and what they do. I will finish this on Friday, okay? This won't take too long. We have around 46 slides, so we can finish it on Friday. All right, so we'll stop here. And we'll complete this on Friday. Remember, everything we will have done up to and including Friday will potentially show up on your in-course test, okay? Next week, Tuesday, I'm going to try and start at 2. There was a question about the lab. What's the question? Oh, tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow? We did skin lab already. We did electrolytes lab already. The endocrine lab is a worksheet. Electrolytes lab is a worksheet. Honestly, all we have left are worksheet labs now that I think about it tonight. Yeah, I think all we have left are worksheet labs. So yeah, just complete the labs left in the worksheet. That's all I can really tell you. So that's probably good news. No more lab work to do. Just finish up the lab manual. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Sir, the lab manuals are due on the final exam, right?
Yeah, but the lab work that I asked for is still due before that. Right? And please note, if those who have not submitted lab material to me, they will be marked late and they will be graded down accordingly.
Sir, the lab work is just the skin and the digestive system.
I think the last thing we did was digestive system last week.
And the skin, those are the ones you're talking.
Yeah. I think as I said, what we have left now is endocrine system, which is a worksheet. So just wait to complete the worksheet. It's not a big deal.
Sir, you have any more tutorials with you because I haven't received mine.
I will carry everything up with me next week.
Okay.
But I don't have a big stack. So I'm not sure what happened to your tutorials. But everything I have, I'll carry down with me next week. Hold on, let me stop the recording before so